minor that really frustrates you that we just tend not to do sometimes. And buying a longer cord is one of those solutions where it's like, you know what? I could be a lot less frustrated during the day and at some things for $2.48 on Amazon. So I broke in, and it's the same cord that charges Sam's tablet. So I bought a couple extra so that like we had them plugged in places in the house where it was like easier, you know? So it's like, why do I put myself through all this extra stress just to like, for like something that I could fix super simple?
You know what's really funny is
there's a sermon there, I know.
And well, we have like gone the other way with so many things. That so so we got Bluetooth headphones.
Yeah.
But now the Bluetooth headphones have a cord. And now I'm going to get a longer cord. And we're going back to the day where we were on the cell phone. I think it was Heather when we were in college that had to get this like 10-foot cord for the phone so she could go sit in the hallway because she had a roommate that went to bed early and didn't like noise. And like everything comes full circle in one way or another. It's just funny.
Yeah, it's outrageous. Hey, I saw the other day a really interesting video. I was going to send it to you, but I didn't. It was like one of these new like fully battery operated trucks.
Oh yeah, like the.
But the weight, I never realized like how heavy they are.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, and this guy bought it, and he liked it, and it worked fine until he realized that like he couldn't drive on some bridges or some streets in his town because he well overexceeded the weight limit because they are like how extremely heavy they are. I thought that was just. I say that only just because I thought it was interesting.
It is. I think there's a lot with that we have a ways to go in.
We do.
The way those things are produced.
Yeah.
Like over the life of the vehicle, it uses a lot less carbon. It's got a lower carbon footprint, but when you talk about the production of it included in, it's insane.
Well, and the plants that are used to charge it, I mean,
right.
You're still plugging it into a coal factory.
And then what happens if, like down here, you get a hurricane and you don't have power for 2 weeks?
Right, yeah. Or you're in California. Or you're in California and they say, "Hey, don't charge your vehicle. We're low on power. But hey, come out for the Ariana Grande concert that we're going to have." I thought that was like, I saw that and I was like, "Wait, what? What's going on? Like, are people for real? Is this like real? Is this the real world?" Anyway.
Yeah. And I think it's really cool that we're moving that way and we have some steps in that direction. I just hope we're able to find some efficient ways of.
I'm waiting for those water-powered cars, man. That's probably my number one favorite. I don't know, like, if it's considered a conspiracy theory or if it was proven factual or whatever, but you heard of that one? So there was a guy who was going to get the patent on this water car, and as soon as it hit the patent market, he was killed in a shooting. In a neighborhood that's never had a shooting or anything like that. So, like, the conspiracy theory is that, like, Ford or GM or something hired somebody to kill him and then bought the patent and buried it.
Well, I met a guy.
That's how all good stories start.
Who got his money from a patent. But he had built a Ford Escort that would run on water.
Yeah.
Solely on water. And it would recycle the vapor waste and put it back in the fuel tank. But once he sold the patent, and with the patent came a kind of a cease and desist. Like, he could no longer pursue that technology because now they owned it and it's sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Isn't that crazy? That's crazy. That's crazy. I'm glad honestly, like, I am glad that I serve Jesus and that I don't have to, like, serve this world, because this world is dark and terrible.
Yeah. Your dad said Norway had to shut down their wind turbines because it was too windy.
That makes sense. I love, I just found a new TikTok, and it's a guy from Norway, and he makes all of these really dry comedy things about, like, how Norway is better, but it's, like, not better. He's like, in Norway, we play board games, and we have the same expression for when you win and when you lose. See, he won, and the guy's like, and I lost. And it's a complete gag reel, but it's so funny.
That is funny.
So,
till we're all growing a beard. A man's face should never be bare. We just want some facial hair. We're anticipating, yeah, everyone's waiting for a beard.
Well, hey, good morning, everybody. Or if you're listening to podcast land, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever it is you're listening. We're glad you're here. And this is Behind the Beards. Here on Behind the Beards, we pull the curtain back, take a look behind the scenes, and try to reveal the things that go on in the hearts and minds of your church and ministry leaders. This season 4, we're kind of moving towards some more practical things, trying to help ourselves and our people live Christian lives every day. So that's Sam in the background there.
I was hoping you couldn't hear him.
Oh, I could always hear Sam. Aaron Partlow, my brother here, is a youth minister in Longview, Texas. And I'm Joshua Fowler, preaching minister in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And it is
one day
chilly.
We're going to get sound booths and be able to film our episodes in complete silence. No Sam, no dog, no garbage trucks, no AC unit.
Yeah, one of these days.
When we make it big, season 58.
Days, right. But man, I had to put a jacket on to get out this morning.
Get out of here.
58 degrees. And
the 58's jacket weather?
Well, in my Jeep, the sun's just coming up. The humidity's high, so there's a little bit of a chill in the air. Once the sun comes up, it feels really, really nice. So it's kind of feels like fall. And then tomorrow it's going to be back to 95. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say it. It's like 70 degrees here, which is like okay. I think 65 is perfect weather for me. I like 65, but it's 70 degrees here, and it's pretty nice. It's pretty nice in the mornings here. I do enjoy that, but in the afternoon and in the evenings it cools off and it's pretty nice. But the afternoons it's still pretty hot over here in the east of Texas, in the Great Pine Forests.
Man, it's kind of crazy when I come home. In the Jeep, you feel all that heat from the road and stuff. And so when you're coming home from the church building, there's one area where I cross over the highway.
I remember.
And as soon as you cross over, you're kind of in this wooded area, and
Swamp
the temperature
water
changes, especially like in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
The temperature changes probably 10 to 12 degrees. Just in a span of, 100 feet. And it's like, oh, you get over there and say, oh, man, that feels so good.
Right.
Breeze comes off the trees and such. So
it's I remember riding in your Jeep and getting to your house, and I was like, what just happened? I just got goosebumps. Like, that doesn't happen. I had gotten a little bit of a chill.
Anything new in Longview?
Man, we got the Netsis Fall Days Pumpkin Spice and Netsis Nice coming up.
Spice and Netsis Nice
coming up like next week. I cannot believe it's the end of September. We've got that working, and we've already got like 85 kids signed up, which is less than we had at our summer one. But we have some churches who weren't able to make it this time because of they were doing some other stuff. So. So that's a little unfortunate, but that's okay. I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about Lane Brown, the preaching minister at the Chandler Street Church of Christ in somewhere Texas. I don't know. Is going to be our speaker. I've decided I was going to lead worship at that, and I'm really excited about that. I haven't led worship at a youth event for a while, so I'm get up there and try to lead worship. in a good manner, and I'm looking forward to that. But that's what we've got working on over here at the Partlow house.
Oh, that's awesome. I think I may have mentioned last week, might have been too early, but the second of my 3 kids is now engaged. So we're getting ready to plan a wedding here in our family. So that's kind of crazy.
That is crazy.
And we knew it was coming, but
Yeah.
all of a sudden, it's like, oh man, this is like real. So that's kind of crazy. But it's football season in Baton Rouge, which means not much changes.
I don't know if you know it's football season everywhere.
I do know. I do know it's football season everywhere. I also know that different communities look at football season in different fashions.
It's kind of a big deal here.
It's kind of a big deal in Longview, Texas. Yeah. Yeah, Texas. And in most places in the South. High school football especially just takes on a different environment. The community really gets around it. And then you talk about, LSU football. Of course, we've got a campus ministry, and some of our members are on campus. And there's some things that in a football community you don't realize how much it affects their job.
Yeah.
Like one of my elders is the dean of accounting at LSU, and he said when LSU is successful at football, our fundraising efforts are so much easier.
Oh yeah.
And when the football team is struggling, trying to get people to reinvest in our programs is just so much more of a challenge. So he said, I don't really care about football, but the success of our team makes my job so much easier. I'm like, I hadn't ever really thought about the fringe aspects of those kind of things. So
that's wild.
It is wild. Little things you don't. The success of LSU football doesn't affect my job. So had never really thought about it until somebody brought it to my attention.
So what are we talking about today on today's episode of Behind the Beards?
Oh, are we talking about? I wanted to look at purpose and calling. I think. I remember like growing up in the church. I don't know if it was my family or my church or my ministry, but there was kind of an expectation that especially good Christian young men were going to go into some form of ministry. And if you had any kind of giftedness or leadership qualities, it was like, hey, you should think about preaching. You should think about youth ministry. And a lot of that came from my family, but a lot of it came from my youth ministers and the ministers at the church and all the other people around church.
Yeah.
And I kind of was asking myself this question. I was listening to a conversation. It kind of made me question myself. And I'll kind of let you think about it as well. But do you encourage your kids to go into ministry?
Never. No, that's not true. That's a good question that I probably haven't put a whole lot of time into thinking about because it's not on the list over here. But I like it. I like it. It's good.
It is, but I just wrote it on there this morning. So.
Oh, okay, good. No, that's a really good question. I do. I do sometimes, and I don't sometimes because, I don't know. Like, there's a lot. There's a lot there. That was a really good pause. There's a lot there. Sometimes, I feel like ministry could be the right calling for them, but then also, I don't know. Vocational ministry is so powerful. It's hard to know when. For me, let me say it this way. Man, I'm so bad at my words this morning. I feel like a politician trying to like answer the question or just talk with feeling like I'm answering the question. For me to really recommend for someone to go into ministry, it's more than just leadership qualities. It's more than just having a strong faith. It's also having an easygoing personality. Because it's not, and there's something about the personality about being able to be humble, being able to apologize and work with people even when maybe you're not in the wrong. It's having the personality to be about being able to like work through frustrations in a healthy manner and things like that. Like those are some of the like early onset personality things that I would look for in order. That's what I look for when I have an intern. I've had a couple people who are unofficial interns, and I'm gonna be hiring an intern for this summer, and it's something that I'm gonna really talk with them about because I feel like those are the underlining traits that really manage the success of somebody long term in ministry. Because you can be a great leader and you could be on fire for God, but church, I don't want to say this, but you're hard to work with. You don't move your feet. You don't easily catch on fire. You don't easily like do some of these things. And sometimes like your minister is like the one person that you go to when the world has been rough on you, that you feel like you can just turn around and be really rough on them. You're like, oh, they're paid to love me, so they're never going to like say something really mean back, you know? And if they do, then they get fired. So like, I feel like, you know, you got to be a rubber tree. You got to be able to take some punches, but then come back in a loving manner. So for me to shorten my answer for you real quick is like, for me, there's some deeper qualities in somebody that I really have to see in order to recommend them to go full-time into ministry. And I think if you're working part-time into ministry or you're doing vocational ministry, it's a little bit easier for you, you know, because I hate to say like, because your income isn't dependent upon that job, you know, or something like that. So, well, I don't know if that's what you're looking for. Or
yeah, what. I have stopped encouraging young people to go into ministry, because I think over the last, over my official career in ministry over the last 10 years, I've seen a lot of things that I wasn't really prepared for. But really over the last 3 or 4 years, I think this ex-evangelical movement with all of these pastors and ex-pastors and ex-church leaders that are moving away from the church, many of them got into ministry because someone told them, hey, you're a good leader, you're a good Christian, you need to go into ministry.
Yeah, you got that personality, or there's something about you that people will listen to you or something.
They didn't go into ministry
Flashy.
because they felt this burning desire that God placed in their heart to sacrifice for the church.
Yeah, man, that's so true.
And so when they got into ministry because someone said, dude, you're a good speaker, you've got a gift, you're good with people, and you're a good Christian, you need to go into ministry.
You're a good communicator.
They went into ministry and then realized, man, the church is messy.
Yeah.
And they had more of a desire to serve the church than they had to serve God's kingdom.
Right.
And the church is always going to fail you because it's made up of flawed individuals.
Totally. Totally.
And so I've learned that it's not my job to encourage people to go into ministry. God is going to call the people into ministry that he wants to come and do his work. And like even with my own life, I delayed answering that calling for so long.
Yeah.
But it got to a point where God said, look, if you don't answer this call, it's going to burn you up. You know, that's how intense it was in my heart and in my own life. That the life I was leading, even as a Christian, was not fulfilling because God had placed something in me that he wanted to be used in a different way.
Absolutely.
And so it's just one of those things that I think we did it with good intentions.
Yeah.
But it's created an issue today. And it also kind of took the role of how do I use my everyday life? How do I fulfill my purpose and my calling to serve the kingdom in my everyday life if I'm not a vocational minister? Because we were kind of brought up with this idea that if you really want to serve the kingdom, you got to go into ministry. Everybody else is just living life.
I was about to say, you know, for me that there was a transition there where it really felt like, hey, if you're not in full-time ministry, then you can't, like, then you don't have to serve. Like, the only way that you can evangelize, the only way that you can spread the gospel is to go into full-time ministry. And that, I think, is just a complete lie. And I feel like it's a cop out. That's what I'm really what I really think, because I feel like it's a cop out. It's like the same thing. I was at a church and they were wanting to hire an associate minister, and like, well, we really need someone to be to evangelize and really go out and evangelize. And that was one of those nights where Lauren wasn't there, so I was feeling really brave, and I just got up and I said,
"You didn't have your filter beside you?"
Yeah, I was like, or y'all could go evangelize in your daily lives, and really serve the purpose. Like, you don't have to pay someone to be your evangelist. We should probably move away from that model of paying somebody to be an evangelist, and really move into the model of everyone being an evangelist, everyone going out and making disciples to follow Jesus, And so for me, there's like this weird conversation where it was like, okay, but that's not the only way that you can serve Jesus. I think I had one team that always really comes to mind that I think about that, and I thought he'd be a fantastic youth minister. But I also, and it's interesting because now he's serving, he's working, he's in the work field and he's working, but he's extremely plugged in with his church, and he literally is a vocational ministry. Like he works and he spends a lot of his time, doing evangelism and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, did he need to go into full-time youth ministry? No, I don't think so. But he's doing it. He's doing it in a healthier way, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what I'm saying.
No, but I've started like encouraging the development of skills. Yeah. So when one of our students showed up at camp this year and delivered this devotional that I was like, bro, you need to teach class. Like, you need to take my class and teach it, because what you just did was really powerful. It was really well thought out.
Right.
It's exactly what these kids needed to hear. And he's one of these guys that he's had one of those personalities that everybody wants to follow. He's dynamic. He's a good-looking young man. He has everything going for him in every aspect. He's smart, and he's willing to do just about anything. He's a hard worker, and I've always kind of encouraged him to do some of the things. He's like, I don't know. And then he shows up at camp and he does this, and I'm like, all right, dude, cat's out of the bag. This is one more skill that you have that I want you to really develop.
Right.
And so I think encouraging the development of those kinds of skills will kind of give them the ability to make that determination on their own what God's calling them to do. But we're going to develop a toolkit for them to take with them into life, because whether they're going to be chemists or engineers or construction workers or janitors or teachers or ministers, and there's these tools that they're always going to be able to use to serve the kingdom, maybe in the church, maybe in their business, but always in their families and in those areas. And so developing the skills, I think, has become more of a focal point for me than trying to drive people into ministry.
So back up a little bit for me. How do you define vocational ministry? We've used that phrase quite a bit. We've talked about it a little bit, but maybe our viewer, our listener, hears that word, and that's one of those words that maybe they don't fully know. So before they Google vocational ministry,
vocational ministry is just ministry as a vocation, as a job, as a way, as a career. So I'm a vocational minister because this is my full-time job. It's how I pay my bills. It's how I support my family. And everything else is just secondary.
That's interesting. I remember OC started a vocational ministry like minor. And I always assumed that vocational ministry was like, how do you do ministry in the vocational world or in the work world? But that makes no sense. Yeah.
And I think it's the same words. It's just used in a different way.
Absolutely.
Because you can do vocational ministry, like in your vocation, you can be a minister, which is kind of where we'll get to here in a little bit.
Yeah.
But some ministers, are bivocational. So they're bivocational ministers.
Yeah.
They have one job that kind of supports their family. They're part-time at the church, and so they receive some aid from the church for what they do.
Yeah, I just wanted people to understand and know how we are referring
But we're
to it as
using
of
it.
right
Yeah,
now.
for sure. But one of the biggest issues we have is like trying to find purpose, right? And I think
Yes.
we see that in our world, not just in the Christian world, but in the world in general. People are looking for a purpose for what they do. How many products do you know sell better if half of the proceeds go to charity?
Right.
Tom's shoes, not great quality shoes, but when
Not
they
a great
said,
charity
"Hey,"
either.
no, well, maybe not. I don't know, but I
Oh,
know
okay.
what
Yeah.
really sold them. What really sold them was they said, "Hey, if you buy a pair of shoes here, we give a pair of shoes to somebody in Africa."
That's right.
And so just the indication that it's like, okay, my money is going towards something. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's this pursuit of purpose that often we don't really know kind of where to find it. And for someone in the church, especially that's kind of been raised being taught that, well, you find your purpose in how you're serving the kingdom.
Right.
How do I find that purpose if I'm a teacher? How do I find that purpose if I'm an accountant? How do I find that purpose if I'm a retail salesman?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's that loss of. It's like we try really hard to not mix our work and our faith life. A lot of that's society. Society has taught us. You always hear all the time. Hey, we got to keep church and state separate.
Yeah, sure.
Church and state separate. And so I feel like in some way, like that's always been ingrained in me, and somehow like work has become state in a sense, and so I've got to keep my work and my faith, separate. And I always think of like school teachers. Well, you can't talk about Jesus in school, but if a teen asks you about it, then you can talk about it, kind of a thing. And so, like in some sense, like some sort of like society has kind of trained our people, or trained people just in general, that hey, you can't talk about your faith unless somebody asks you about it. And how do you get somebody to ask you about it? Well, I can't invite somebody to church because I don't want to offend them. Man, offend them. like offend them. Jesus offends people all the time. There's a reason why he was run out of cities, kind of a thing. Okay, audience, please don't hear that the only thing I said there was offend other people. Don't do that. Okay? Don't do that. I don't think that's the right attitude. My point is like, don't be afraid to embrace the fuller picture and purpose of who Jesus Christ is in your life. Don't be afraid of what he has done for you and ignore what he has done for you and that kind of stuff. And so, like, where do we find purpose and calling? Well, I think we stop ignoring our true purpose and our calling. We stop taking the easy part of Christianity, which is like having a community, going to church, and those kind of things. Like, guys, I hate to tell you this, that's the easy part of Christianity. It's fun and it's nice to get up and go to church on Sunday morning. It's relaxing. I know some of you are like, that's crazy, but it is. Like, that's the enjoyable moments of Christianity. The hard parts is when you're preaching a different message than what the world is preaching. Mm-hmm. The hard parts are actually talking about your faith and having conversations with other people who aren't believers or who have been hurt in this world, and all they ever see is darkness, and then showing them the true light of who Jesus is, and having those conversations. And so, but we've stopped doing that. Like, we've stopped doing that in our work. We've stopped doing that in our interactions with people because we're afraid of what they'll say or what they'll look, because of so many bad examples that have been out there of people doing it in really horrendous or bad ways, or being just bad people in general and taking advantage of the system.
Well, and I think some of the issue has been, we have reserved the term of calling to the big jobs in our mind.
Right, yeah.
Can someone be called to be a garbage collector?
Right.
Yeah, man, that's not really a calling. Or is it?
They make good money.
No one really feels called to be a construction laborer.
Right.
Oh, but you can be called to go serve this nonprofit, or you can be called to go serve this church, or called in the ministry. And so I think we've put an unfair kind of status on calling.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we are able to see the thing in life that God has prepared us to do, and we find ourselves in that place as a Christian, using the gifts and talents that God has given us. Look, it takes a special individual to do all these works. It takes a special individual to work and to build things with their hands, to put bricks and stones together in a way that other people can't, to be someone that supports that person, to be willing to endure hot days behind a smelly trash truck to make sure that the people in the communities are able to live in cleanliness and live more healthy ways because that stuff's not piling up. Do I see what I'm doing as a calling? And if I do, that's where I can find that purpose. And the truth is, there's some really unique opportunities that lay people have in their daily lives to share the gospel with people that I simply don't have as a full-time minister. And it can be something as simple as just mixing in your Christianity with your work. If you're a salesman, are you a salesman that's got character and integrity that people can trust and rely on? If you're a teacher, are you a teacher that knows how to really care for those kids in a way that sees that deep need? And you don't have to preach book, chapter, verse to minister and be Jesus to people. You don't have to beat your chest and say, I'm a Christian, and you need to be one too to demonstrate the love and the mercy of the Savior.
That's right.
I told you that I found this spin class that I have a love-hate relationship with. But the guy that runs the class on Monday and Wednesday, I wouldn't have necessarily known that he was a Christian, except every once in a while he'll mention that he was on a deal, and he goes, man, I've never felt closer to God than when I was riding my bike through the mountains in the West. And then this last Wednesday, we're in a class, and we're towards the end of this class. We're spent. I'm sweating. I'm tired. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And he plays this song by Plum called Lord, I Need You. And, the lyrics are, how many times have you told me to just keep breathing? Lord, I need you. God, I need you now. And, the music that he plays is clean. And then he puts in this little song in there that's just, God, I need you. God, I need you. God, I need you, over and over again. And then he goes back to the regular track. And so just those little moments of putting in those thoughts about God in the day. And something as simple as a spin class at a gym. And so there are these unique opportunities that you have to influence people and to show them what it is to love Jesus.
Right, yeah.
And those are things that I think we need to really learn to capitalize on and to show our people, hey, you might not wear minister as a title, but there's a lot of ministry that you can do that I'm not in a position to do. And
there's some big moments where we just need to practice what we preach. Josh and I, we talk about this quite a bit in a lot of episodes where we're teaching a class and those lessons that we're teaching really hit home. Whether it's about humility, whether it's about submitting ourselves to God and really listening to his calling in a sense. But there's a lot of times where we have to practice what we preach. We talk about loving on others and telling other people about our faith. But there's so many moments that we just plain and simple don't.
Yeah. Do you know who Nick Vujicic is?
No.
No? He's this motivation speaker. He was born with no arms and no legs.
Yes.
So he's
should have led with that.
He's kind of a comedian. He's a Christian motivational speaker.
Yeah.
And was listening to one of his talks the other day, and of course he's got feet appendages on the bottom of his torso. And he said when he was born, the doctor apologized to his mother for not realizing in the womb that he didn't have arms or legs. And he apologizes for not giving her the opportunity to abort him. And he said, your son will never walk. And then he kind of looks at the camera and he walks across the stage and laughs.
Right.
And then he talks about his faith, and he says, how ironic that the doctors told my parents that I would never live a life, but here I am, a man with no arms and no legs, being the hands and feet of Jesus.
Right? Yes. Oh man, I've heard him say that.
I'm like, that is.
The guy's amazing. If you have not seen
Yeah.
any of his stuff, Google that name. Go look him. Go check him out because he is one of those guys that I watch a lot of TikToks, and if his TikTok pops up, I always watch it. I always watch it all the way
Yeah.
to the end. Like one, because I want him more on my For You page, but two, he's fascinating and he's so inspiring, and I hate to say, like, physically he has so much less, and yet he's doing so much more than I need to do. Like, I need to do more. He's powerful. He's amazing.
But it's just this idea of, like, he has seized an opportunity that he has that he can minister to people. And what he does is no less ministry than what I do.
No.
I see myself as a full-time minister ministering to the church. But my ministry to the church is preparing them to go change the world.
Right.
Because our people are the ones that are encountering the world every day, day in, day out, every moment of every day. And they have those opportunities like no one else to minister.
Right.
And so finding that purpose and that calling, no matter what it is, no matter where you are, finding that place that God has equipped you to be uniquely in that position, to minister to those people in a way that nobody else can because they're not there.
I think today's episode, like, what we're saying is like, you've been called.
Yeah.
You've been called. Like, you have been called. So are you picking up? We jokingly started this time talking about, like, how we have reversed, like, we've gone backwards. Like, when, I was talking about a 9-foot cord I have to charge my headphones, I think of those phone cords that were, like, super long that would, like, go around your entire house, or whatever. But, like, you have been called. And your cord might look a little bit differently, but you have been called, and we have to live into that calling. Calling does not mean that you go into full-time ministry. Calling could be just listening to what Jesus is really trying to ask you to do in your life right now, whether it's at work, whether it's at the park, whether it's wherever. I think just people need to know that, like, you have been called. You've been called as soon as you were baptized, before you were baptized. Like, you heard the calling, and before you were baptized, it was that Jesus loves you and he wants to save you. So then you got baptized. And now your calling is, hey, live this life and actually go and talk and tell other people about your faith and about who Jesus is. That you don't have to go into full-time ministry to have an effect on God's kingdom. That's bogus. That's a lie.
And I think we focus a lot when it comes to Jesus' ministry. We focus a lot on the apostles. And Jesus came in and he called the apostles, and they served the kingdom in such a unique way and powerful way. But what we miss is, we don't really know what the woman who was caught in adultery did.
Right.
We know that Jesus sent her, and he said,
I believe it was an adultery.
Yeah. And
I'm just kidding, but yeah.
Go and sin no more.
Right.
But the woman at the well, when he encountered her,
right,
he didn't send her to do anything. He met her at the well. He treated her like a human. He loved her. He gave her value and purpose. And what does she do with that? She goes and she changes the city. She goes into the town and she tells everyone, come to the well and meet a man who told me everything I've ever done. And this woman, not an apostle, not a disciple, a woman living a life of sin that meets Jesus, and because she meets Jesus says, I can't keep this to myself. I'm going to go back into town and I'm going to bring all of these other Samaritans out here to meet the Messiah. And I think that's just such a powerful image of who we are to be as everyday Christians. The disciples get a lot of the glory. They get a lot of the FaceTime. They get a lot of, they wrote the letters. They get a lot of the credit. But the Bible is full of these crowds of people that followed Jesus, met him, had their lives changed by him, and then went back home and changed their families and changed their communities.
Well, what we've also done is we've put certain roles on a pedestal. Like I will never be as important as the preacher. You know, I will. You know, it's the same. It's the
Even
same
the jokes,
joke.
right? You want a promotion? Youth
That's
minister, you want
right.
a
The youth
promotion?
we've promoted our youth minister to preacher. You know, so now he's worth something. Well,
I
what'd
just
you
say
just say
that's
about
not
your
a promotion.
yeah? What did you just say about your teenagers? That they are less important than the members who sit in your pew. That's exactly what you just said when you make a joke about, oh, you ever going to take a real job and be a preacher instead of the youth minister? Man, don't say that. That's not right. It's not a funny joke. So stop. But we do that all the time. We take these. I have this thing right now that's going on in my youth group, and I love it. I really do love it because I say, you know, because if you want to be first in God's kingdom, you have to be, and everyone in the audience just goes last. You know, and so we've been really hitting about this humility and putting others first and serving others. And we've put so many roles on a pedestal and say, well, that's the only way that you can really serve is by leading out in front of everybody else. Man, that's not true. It's not better. You know, Paul writes in his letters, you know, I couldn't do this ministry if you didn't support me. What you do back there is, and what you do behind the scenes is so important. Jesus mentions those, the women and the men who support him and did stuff and followed along him and did stuff. It wasn't just the apostles. The apostles had a very crucial and important role, but there was plenty of other people in the Bible who are mentioned who were doing crucial behind the scenes things that some reason, somehow, we've deemed them not worthy or not, you know, not a calling, kind of a sense. And I think that that's an injustice, and I think that that's Satan manipulating the way that we see things, because God's kingdom isn't about being out front and leading. It's about locking yourself in a closet and praying in silence. It's not about standing on the street corner and saying, "Look how righteous I am." It's not. And so I challenge you to think about, like, if the only way that you're living out your calling is living it out in a public sense like that, to maybe kind of rethink about who you're serving in that sense. Is it your ego or is it yourself? Because there's opportunities, I guarantee you, around to live out your calling and to serve without having other people praise you for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, rolling this into the behind the beards moment, for me, it comes around as ministers and as Christians, we need to reframe our view of influence, of how we influence people.
Yeah.
You know, as ministers, it's been a lot. How many people are in the pew? Is my name known? When something comes up, are people calling me, or do they consider me when it comes to these other, you know, whether it's speaking engagements or summer series or that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
That when our names are brought up, we feel like we are people of influence. When people start showing up and the numbers increase in the pews, we feel like we've had a good influence. Now in the world of social media, it's how many followers do you have? How many people are watching you online, and how many different states and how many different countries? How many people liked that reel or that TikTok that you posted, or how many people are commenting? Whereas really and truly, you know, the influence we have is in inspiring our people to make evident Christ in the world. That if our people are going into their everyday jobs and they are inspired to be Christian teachers, Christian CPAs, Christian construction workers, Christian janitors, whatever it is that Christian leads them into the world, you know, that is where we can have the most influence. And as everyday Christian people, our ability to influence people is far greater than we could ever imagine. We just have to seize those opportunities that are before us. And that's kind of been my challenge of late, is reshaping what it means to be a minister of people and be influential. And it's not an easy move to make. but it's one that really has rewards when you hear the stories your people tell about
Right.
the encounters that they've had, either in their hobbies or in their work or in their communities, and you see them making a difference for the cause of Christ. That's what it means to be influential as a minister. It doesn't matter if people in another state know me. It doesn't matter how many followers I have on YouTube or on TikTok or on Instagram. It doesn't matter how many people are liking and sharing our messages. What matters is, are we inspiring the people that God's put in front of us to go live those Christian lives and be ministers in their daily walks? So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, well, we remind you something here at Behind the Beers. We close out every episode this way because it is extremely important to us.
It is.
But it's Galatians 6:9, and don't grow weary in doing good. Don't grow weary in doing good. Listen to your calling from Jesus Christ. Okay?
Don't grow weary
in doing good. This world is messy. This life is messy. So allow Christ to use you to do something different, something good in His name. I'm Aaron, and this is Josh, and we will see you next week on Behind the Beards.
Till we're all growing a beard. A man's face should never be bare. We just want some facial hair. We're anticipating, yeah, everyone's waiting for a beard.
That's good stuff, man.
It's a good show. I like it.
My chair, the hydraulics on my chair are messed up, so it kept like sinking. Like
That's
at one
funny.
point, like only my this much was above the bottom line. I'm like, oh man, I can't sit up any taller.
That's funny. Sam was like running down the hallway with his plastic sword. Ah! And I was like, "What are you doing, child?" He's like, "What? I'm in the hallway." And I was like, "But I can hear you." So, that is funny. All right, ready to take